The night was cold in Winterfell, but not the kind of cold that bites the skin. It was the kind that creeps into the heart. The castle walls stood tall under the pale moonlight, and the direwolves howled in the distance like they sensed something was about to change forever. King Robert Baratheon had come to the north, but this time it wasn't just a royal visit filled with laughter, wine, and loud stories. Something was different. Robert had grown older, heavier, and tired of the lies in King's Landing. He had seen too much betrayal, too many smiling faces hiding sharp knives, and deep inside he carried a regret that never left him. The past he lost, the love he could never save. In the great hall of Winterfell, torches burned bright. Lord Eddard Stark stood beside his sons, Robb Stark, tall and proud, and Jon Snow, quiet and watchful. Robert sat at the head of the table, drinking heavily, but his blue eyes were not drunk. They were thinking. "You have raised them well, Ned," Robert said, pointing his goblet toward the two young men. "They have the look of warriors." Robb held his head high. He looked like a true Stark, auburn hair, strong jaw, honor in his eyes. Jon stood slightly behind, his dark hair falling over his face, his expression calm but serious. There was something about Jon that Robert could not ignore. A fire, but controlled. Later that night, after the feast ended and the music faded, Robert asked Ned to walk with him alone in the Godswood. The wind moved softly through the weirwood branches. The red leaves shimmered like drops of blood under the moon. "I am dying, Ned," Robert said suddenly. Ned stopped walking. "You are strong, Your Grace." Robert laughed bitterly. "Strong? Your Grace." Robert laughed bitterly. "Strong? I can barely climb stairs without losing breath. The Lannisters are eating my kingdom, piece by piece." Joffrey, his voice hardened. "That boy is no son of mine." Ned felt the weight of those words. "I need a legacy," Robert continued. "Not just a throne filled with lions and liars. I need warriors, leaders, men who can remind the Seven Kingdoms what strength and honor truly mean." Ned looked confused. "What are you saying?" Robert turned toward him. "I want Robb and Jon to come south with me." The words hung heavy in the cold air. "They are boys," Ned said carefully. "They are wolves," Robert corrected. "And the realm needs wolves." Robert explained his plan. He would name Robb Stark as his official squire and future warden of the North in royal favor. And Jon Snow, Jon, would be taken under his direct mentorship. Not as a bastard, not as a shadow, but as a warrior trained by the king himself. "There is something in that boy," Robert said. "He reminds me of someone." Ned's heart pounded, but he stayed silent. "If I cannot trust my own blood," Robert continued, "then I will build my legacy from men I trust." The next morning the news spread through Winterfell like wildfire. Robb felt proud. This was his chance to prove himself, to see the world beyond the North. He imagined battles, glory, and honor. Jon felt something different. He had always been the outsider, the bastard of Winterfell, the boy who stood slightly behind his true-born siblings. But now the king himself had chosen him. Why? That question stayed in his mind. As they prepared to leave, Catelyn Stark pulled Robb into her arms, tears shining in her eyes. "You must stay strong. Remember who you are." Jon stood alone for a moment until Arya ran to him. "Don't let them change you," she whispered fiercely. Jon smiled softly. "I won't." When the royal procession finally left Winterfell, the direwolves ran along the road for miles before stopping at the edge of the forest. The North was watching them go. Robert rode at the front, his armor shining in the sunlight. Beside him rode Robb Stark, young and proud. Slightly behind them, Jon Snow rode quietly, his eyes scanning everything. King's Landing was far away, but danger was already closer than they knew. In the capital, Queen Cersei Lannister stood on a balcony, looking over the city. A raven had arrived with news from the north. She crushed the letter in her hand. "Robert is bringing the wolves south," she said coldly. Jaime Lannister stepped beside her. "Then we will remind them," he replied softly, "that lions rule the capital." Far in the distance, thunder rolled across a clear sky. The Game of Thrones had just changed. And this time, Robert Baratheon's living legacy would not be golden-haired princes. It would be wolves raised by a storm king. This was only the beginning. The road south felt longer than anyone expected. At first, it was exciting. Robb rode proudly beside King Robert, listening to his loud stories about battles, drinking contests, and the great rebellion that had once shaken the Seven Kingdoms. Robert laughed often, but sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, his smile faded. Jon noticed. Jon always noticed things others didn't. At night, when the campfires burned low and most men were asleep, Robert would sit alone, staring into the flames like he was looking at ghosts. One night, Jon gathered his courage and approached him. "You should sleep, Your Grace," Jon said respectfully. Robert looked up, surprised. "And you should stop calling me that when we're alone. It makes me feel older than I already am." Jon hesitated. "What should I call you then?" Robert smirked. "Call me what the men call me. Call me Robert." Jon almost smiled. "Yes, Robert." The king studied him closely. "Do you know why I brought you south, boy?" Jon answered honestly. "No." Robert sighed. "Because I see fire in you, but not wildfire. Controlled fire. The kind a true warrior has. The kind that doesn't fight for glory, but for something deeper." Jon didn't respond, but his chest tightened. Robert leaned back. "The realm is rotting, Jon. The Lannisters smile too much. They whisper too much. I need men who will not bow to gold." The next day they crossed the neck. The air grew warmer. The trees changed. The north slowly faded behind them. Robb loved every moment of it. He trained daily with knights from the south, proving he was not just some northern boy. His sword clashed against steel again and again. Sweat ran down his face, but he never complained. One afternoon, he defeated a knight from House Clegane in front of many watching soldiers. The camp cheered. Robert laughed loudly. "That's a Stark for you." But not everyone cheered. Some southern lords whispered among themselves. "They're wolves," one muttered, "and wolves don't belong in the capital." When they finally reached King's Landing, the city looked like a different world. Tall towers, crowded streets, golden banners flying proudly. The smell of the sea mixed with the smell of people and smoke. Robb looked amazed. Jon looked cautious. The Red Keep stood high above the city, shining red in the sunlight like dried blood. Queen Cersei Lannister was waiting at the gates. She smiled when Robert approached, but her eyes were cold when they landed on Robb and Jon. "Your Grace," she said sweetly, "and you've brought guests." Robert dismounted heavily. "Not guests. The future." Cersei's smile did not move. "How lovely." Behind her stood Joffrey, dressed in royal colors. He stared at Robb with clear dislike. "Who is that bastard?" Joffrey asked loudly, pointing at Jon. The courtyard went silent. Robb's hand moved to his sword, but Jon stopped him with a small look. Jon stepped forward calmly. "My name is Jon Snow." Joffrey smirked. "Snow. Fitting." Before anyone else could speak, Robert's voice exploded like thunder. "You will speak to him with respect," Robert roared, "or you will answer to me." Even Cersei looked surprised. Joffrey stepped back, shocked and embarrassed. Robert turned to the gathered court. "Hear me clearly. Robb Stark is under my protection and favor, and Jon Snow." He paused, looking directly at the nobles. "Jon Snow stands with me." Whispers spread across the courtyard. Tywin Lannister was not present, but his power was felt everywhere. Cersei's fingers tightened slightly at her side. Later that evening, in the small council chamber, tensions rose. Cersei spoke first. "You are replacing your own blood with northern boys." Robert slammed his fist on the table. "My blood," he shouted. "Don't speak to me of blood." The room fell silent. Jon and Robb were not inside, but the servants heard everything. That night, as Jon stood on a balcony overlooking Blackwater Bay, he felt something strange, like the city itself was alive, watching him. Robb joined him. "Do you trust them?" Robb asked quietly. Jon shook his head. "No." Robb looked toward the Red Keep towers. "Then we stay together." Jon nodded. But inside the castle walls, plans were already forming. Cersei sat with Jaime in her chambers. "He is turning them into symbols," she said coldly. "If the realm starts loving them, if the soldiers follow them." Jaime leaned against the wall. "Then accidents can happen." Cersei looked out the window toward the dark city. "Yes," she whispered, "accidents happen all the time." In the courtyard below, Robert watched Robb spar with the royal guards. Jon stood beside him. Robert felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. But in King's Landing, hope was a dangerous thing, and the lions were already sharpening their claws. King's Landing did not sleep peacefully. It breathed secrets. It whispered danger. Only 3 days after their arrival, the first accident happened. Robb was training in the yard at sunrise. The air was still cool, and most of the court had not yet woken. He faced Sir Meryn Trant, who fought harder than usual that morning. Their swords clashed again and again, steel ringing against steel. Robb pushed forward, his northern strength surprising the knight. Then suddenly, Robb's foot slipped. The ground beneath him had been covered in oil. He barely managed to roll away before Sir Meryn's blade came down where his head had been. The courtyard froze. Robb jumped back to his feet quickly, his eyes scanning the stones. The oil shimmered under the early light. "That's strange," Sir Meryn muttered. Jon, who had been watching from the side, stepped forward immediately. He knelt and touched the ground, fresh, deliberate. This was no accident. Before anyone could speak further, Robert's booming voice filled the yard. "What in the 7 hells is going on?" Robb stood tall. "Nothing, Robert. Just a slip." Jon's eyes met Robert's, and in that silent look, Robert understood. Later that morning, Robert stormed into the small council chamber. Cersei sat calmly, sipping wine. Littlefinger smiled like he enjoyed the chaos. Varys watched everything with quiet interest. "Someone tried to kill the boy," Robert growled. Cersei raised an eyebrow. "That is a bold accusation. The training yard was covered in oil." Littlefinger chuckled lightly. "King's Landing is a messy place, Your Grace." Robert slammed his fist down. "If I find out any of you are behind this—" "But you won't," Varys interrupted gently, "because whoever did it is clever." Robert hated when the spider was right. That evening, Jon found Robb in their chambers sharpening his sword. "You should be angry," Jon said. Robb looked up. "I am." "No," Jon replied quietly. "You're pretending you're not." Robb sighed. "If I show anger, they win." Jon respected that. But he also knew something else. "They're testing us," Jon said. "Seeing how we react." Robb nodded slowly. "Then we don't react the way they expect." The next day, something even more dangerous happened. King Robert insisted on a royal hunt outside the city. He wanted to show the court that nothing frightened him. He wanted to remind everyone who he was. The hunting party rode deep into the Kingswood. Birds scattered as horns echoed through the trees. Robert rode ahead, laughing loudly. Robb followed close, eager. Jon stayed slightly behind, watching the guards. Something felt wrong. Then it happened. A wild boar burst from the bushes, larger than any they had seen before. It charged directly at Robert's horse. Robert raised his spear, but the horse panicked. The spear missed. The boar slammed into the horse, throwing Robert violently to the ground. The beast turned toward the fallen king. Before anyone else could react, Robb moved first. He leapt from his horse, drawing his sword. Jon was right behind him. Robb struck the boar's side, wounding it, but not killing it. The beast screamed and turned toward him. Jon didn't hesitate. He drove his blade straight into the boar's neck with controlled force. The animal collapsed inches from Robert. Silence filled the forest. Robert lay on the ground, breathing heavily. He stared at the dead boar, then at the two young men standing over him. For a moment, something like realization crossed his face. If they had been slower, if they had hesitated, Robert stood slowly, brushing dirt from his armor. "Well," he said loudly, forcing a laugh, "seems the wolves hunt well." But John noticed something again. There had been no warning from the scouts, no sound before the attack, and the boar had been unusually aggressive. Back at the Red Keep, the news spread quickly. "The wolves saved the stag," servants whispered. Cersei listened quietly as the report was delivered. "How unfortunate," she said softly. Jaime frowned slightly. "That was risky." Cersei's eyes hardened. Robert was supposed to drink more wine. He was supposed to drink more wine. He was supposed to be slower. Jaime crossed his arms. "And now?" "Now," Cersei said calmly, "the realm will start seeing them as heroes." That night, in his chambers, Robert called Jon and Robb to him privately. He poured 3 cups of wine, but did not drink his own. "You saved my life," he said seriously. Robb spoke first. "You would have done the same for us." Robert looked at Jon. "Would I?" Jon met his gaze steadily. "Yes." Robert studied him for a long moment. "You two remind me of the rebellion," Robert said quietly. "Before the throne, before the lies, when men fought for something real." He stood and walked toward the window. "If anything happens to me," he began, then stopped. Robb stiffened. "Nothing will happen." Robert turned slowly. "In King's Landing, something always happens." Outside, thunder rolled again, though the sky was clear. The wolves had saved the king, but now they had painted targets on their backs, and somewhere in the Red Keep, a new plan was already being made. After the hunt, everything changed. The city no longer saw Robb and Jon as just northern boys. They were whispered about in taverns and markets. The young wolf who struck first, the bastard who saved the king, the true strength beside the Iron Throne. Those whispers spread fast, and whispers were dangerous. One evening, a royal feast was held in their honor. The great hall of the Red Keep was filled with music, wine, and false smiles. Golden goblets shined under torchlight. Lords and ladies dressed in silk watched the two wolves carefully. Cersei smiled too much that night. Robb sat proudly beside Robert, who was louder than ever. "To the wolves!" Robert shouted, raising his cup. "May they remind the lions how to fight!" The hall laughed nervously. Jon sat lower down the table, silent. He noticed small things: a servant pouring wine too slowly, a knight watching Robb too closely, Cersei whispering to Pycelle. Halfway through the feast, a dancer entered the hall. She was beautiful and moved like flowing water. The music grew softer as she approached the high table. Robb leaned slightly forward, curious. Jon felt cold. The dancer spun closer, closer, until suddenly a thin blade slipped from her sleeve. It happened in a heartbeat. She lunged, not at Robert, at Robb. But Robb reacted quickly. He grabbed the table and flipped it forward. The blade struck wood instead of flesh. Wine and plates crashed to the floor. Chaos exploded in the hall. Jon moved without thinking. He grabbed a fallen knife and tackled the assassin before she could rise. The blade in her hand cut his arm, but he didn't let go. He forced her wrist down until guards surrounded them. The music had stopped. The hall was silent except for heavy breathing. Robert stood slowly, his face red with fury. "Who sent you?" he roared. The assassin laughed weakly through blood. "The game is bigger than wolves." Before she could say another word, she bit down on something hidden in her mouth. Foam appeared at her lips. Within seconds, she was dead. Poison. Cersei stood, pretending to look shocked. How terrible. An attack during a celebration. Robert's eyes burned with anger. This was no random attack. Jon stood up slowly, holding his bleeding arm. His eyes scanned the room. He felt it again, that invisible web around them. Robb looked at him. "You're hurt." "It's nothing. Jon replied quietly. But inside, he knew something. They were not just being tested anymore, they were being hunted. Later that night, Robert stormed into Cersei's chambers without warning. "You think I'm blind," he shouted. Cersei stood calmly near the window. "You accuse me without proof." "She aimed for Robb," Robert growled. "Not me." Cersei's voice turned colder. "Perhaps someone fears your northern pets are growing too popular." Robert stepped closer. "If anything happens to them, I will burn this city to the ground." Cersei did not flinch. "You are not the warrior you once were, Robert." Those words cut deeper than any blade. Meanwhile, in a dark corridor beneath the castle, Varys met secretly with Jon. "You have made powerful enemies," Varys said softly. Jon crossed his arms. "We didn't ask for this. No one ever does," Varys replied. "But understand this. You and your brother are symbols now, and symbols threaten those who hold power." Jon studied the spider carefully. "Why tell me this?" Varys smiled faintly. "Because sometimes the realm needs different heroes." Jon did not fully trust him, but he listened. The next morning, Robert made a bold move. In front of the entire court, he declared Robb Stark as his official heir to the position of protector of the realm should anything happen to him until a true and worthy successor was chosen. Gasps filled the throne room. Joffrey's face turned white with rage. Cersei's fingers tightened around her gown. "And Jon Snow," Robert continued loudly, "will train beside the King's Guard. He will stand where honor still matters." The message was clear. Robert was building his legacy openly now, not through blood, through strength. That night, Robb and Jon stood together on the walls of the Red Keep, looking out over the city lights. "They won't stop," Robb said quietly. "No," Jon agreed. "They won't." Robb looked at his brother. "Are you afraid?" Jon thought for a moment. "Yes?" Robb nodded. "Good. That means we're not foolish." Below them, King's Landing looked peaceful. Below them, King's Landing looked peaceful, but both of them felt it, the storm building under the calm. Somewhere inside the castle, Cersei met with a hooded figure in secret. "If poison fails," she whispered, "then we use something stronger." The hooded man nodded. "War?" Cersei's lips curved slightly. "No," she said softly, "something worse. The wolves had survived blades and beasts, but in the Game of Thrones, survival was never permanent, and the next move would shake the entire kingdom." The next move came faster than anyone expected. 3 nights after the feast, a fire broke out in the lower streets of King's Landing. At first it seemed like a simple accident, a lantern knocked over, a drunk man asleep, but the fire spread too quickly, too perfectly. It moved like it had been guided. The flames climbed houses, swallowed shops, and turned the night sky orange. Screams filled the air. From the Red Keep balcony, Robert watched the city burn. "Get the guards," he shouted. "Open the gates, help them." But before orders could fully move, another rumor began spreading through the streets. The wolves did it. They brought northern magic. The bastard is cursed. By the time Jon and Robb reached the burning district with soldiers, the people were already looking at them with fear. A woman screamed when she saw Jon's dark cloak. "It's him, the Snow Boy!" Robb stepped forward angrily. "We're here to help." But fear does not listen to reason. Stones were thrown. One struck Robb's shoulder, another hit Jon's back. Jon grabbed Robb's arm. "Stop. This is what they want." They turned their focus to saving lives instead. Robb carried children out of collapsing houses. Jon cut through burning beams to free trapped men. They worked without rest, sweat mixing with smoke. By sunrise, the fire was finally dying, and so was the city's trust. Later that day in the throne room, a group of angry merchants demanded justice. "Our homes are gone," one shouted, and ever since those northerners arrived, chaos follows. Robert stood from the throne slowly. You dare accuse them without proof? Proof? Another man yelled. The fire started near their patrol route. Cersei watched quietly from beside the throne. Her face showed concern, but her eyes showed something else, satisfaction. Jon stepped forward calmly. If we wanted your city burned, would we have saved your children? The room fell silent, but doubt had already been planted. That evening, Varys met Robert in private. The city is fragile, Varys warned. If the people turn fully against the wolves, it weakens you. Robert poured wine but did not drink. I know. Perhaps, Varys suggested carefully, the true enemy wants division. Robert looked up sharply. Speak clearly. The fire was no accident, Varys said. Wildfire was used. Robert's face hardened. Wildfire was used. Robert's face hardened. Only a few knew how to handle it, and those few were close to power. Meanwhile, Robb paced inside his chamber, anger burning in his chest. They blame us for saving them, he snapped. Jon sat quietly, cleaning his sword. That was the plan. Robb stopped. What do you mean? They can't kill us easily, Jon explained. So they turn the people against us, make us look like monsters. Make us look like monsters. Robb clenched his fists. Then we fight back. Jon looked at him seriously. No, we endure. Robb frowned. Endure. Robb frowned. Endure? Yes, Jon said softly, because if we lose control, we prove them right. Before Robb could answer, a loud knock hit the door. A royal messenger entered, pale and shaking. Your Graces, the king, he has collapsed. Everything froze. Jon and Robb rushed through the corridors. Guards moved in panic. Servants whispered fearfully. They found Robert in his chamber, lying on his bed, sweating heavily. Grand Maester Pycelle stood nearby. What happened? Robb demanded. Wine, Pycelle answered weakly. Too much wine. Jon stepped closer to the bedside. He looked at the goblet on the table. He smelled it. It wasn't just wine. Robert opened his eyes slightly when he saw them. You too? He whispered hoarsely. Robb knelt beside him. We're here. Robert grabbed Jon's wrist weakly. Don't trust the lions. His breathing grew heavier. Jon felt something break inside him. Robert had not been perfect. He drank too much. He shouted too much. But he had believed in them, and now someone had tried to take him away. Cersei entered the room slowly, her face pale with fake worry. My poor husband, she said softly. Jon stood up and looked at her directly. For a moment, neither of them looked away. It was silent war. That night, the Red Keep felt colder than ever. Whispers moved through every hallway. If the king dies, who rules next? Joffrey. Robb stood by the window in their chamber, staring at the dark city. If Robert dies, he said quietly, they will come for us openly. Jon nodded. Yes. Robb looked at him. Then maybe we stop playing defense. Jon's eyes darkened slightly. What are you thinking? Robb turned fully toward him. If they want a game, he said firmly, then we show them wolves don't just survive. They hunt. Outside, thunder finally cracked across the sky. The storm had arrived. And this time it would not burn quietly in the shadows. The storm did not wait. By morning, word had spread across King's Landing. King Robert Baratheon was dying. Bells rang slowly, heavily, like the city itself was holding its breath. Inside the Red Keep, tension filled every corridor. Guards were doubled. Servants whispered in corners, and the Lannister banners seemed to hang a little prouder. Jon and Robb stood outside Robert's chamber. No one had allowed them back inside since the night before. They're keeping us away, Robb said quietly. Yes, Jon replied, because whatever happens next, they don't want us near it. Before they could speak further, the doors opened. Cersei stepped out, dressed already in black and gold. Not morning black, royal black. "It is done," she said calmly. "The king has passed." The words hit like a sword. Robb's jaw tightened. Jon felt the world grow strangely silent. "How?" Robb demanded. "His heart," Cersei answered smoothly. "Too much wine. Too many years of excess." Jon stared at her face. No tears, no sadness, just control. Behind her, Joffrey appeared, already wearing a golden crown too large for his head. "Kneel," Joffrey said sharply, "before your king." The courtyard outside quickly filled with lords and knights. Robb looked at Jon. Jon gave a small nod. Slowly, they knelt, but not out of loyalty, out of strategy. Joffrey stepped forward proudly. "You will swear your loyalty to me, here and now." Robb lifted his head slightly. "We serve the throne, as we served your father." "That is not what I asked," Joffrey snapped. Before tension could explode, a new voice entered the courtyard. "Enough." All heads turned. Lord Stannis Baratheon stood at the gates, armored and stern. Beside him were soldiers wearing the stag of House Baratheon. "I have returned," Stannis said coldly, "to claim what is mine." The courtyard fell into chaos. Cersei's face changed for the first time, not fear, but calculation. Stannis stepped forward. "Robert had no true-born sons. The Iron Throne belongs to me." Gasps spread like wildfire. Joffrey's face went red. "Guards, arrest him!" But many guards hesitated. Jon felt it, the shift. The kingdom was cracking open. Stannis's eyes moved to Robb and Jon. "The North stands for honor. Tell me, wolves, do you stand with a lie?" Every eye turned to them. This was the moment. Robb stood slowly. Jon rose beside him. Robb spoke clearly. "We stand for the truth." Cersei's voice turned icy. "Careful, boy." Jon stepped forward calmly. "The realm deserves a rightful king." Joffrey screamed. "Traitors!" Suddenly swords were drawn. The courtyard exploded into movement. Some guards moved toward Stannis, others toward Joffrey. Confusion filled the air. Robb drew his sword, standing back to back with Jon. "We didn't plan this," Robb muttered. "No," Jon replied quietly. "But maybe Robert did." In the chaos, Stannis's men fought their way forward. Steel clashed against steel. The sound echoed off the castle walls. Jaime Lannister appeared, sword in hand, moving like a golden shadow toward Robb. Their blades met with a violent crash. Jaime smirked. "You should have stayed in the north." Robb pushed back hard. "And you should have stayed away from my family." Meanwhile, Jon found himself facing 3 gold cloaks at once. He moved carefully, controlled, like Robert had trained him. One by one, he disarmed them without killing. But the battle was not meant to be won. Suddenly, the city bells began ringing wildly. Another army banner appeared beyond the gates. Direwolves. The North had arrived. Lord Eddard Stark rode through the chaos with northern soldiers behind him. His face was stone. "You move too fast, Lannisters," Ned Stark said coldly. Cersei's control finally cracked. "This is treason," she shouted. "No," Ned replied calmly. "This is justice." The fighting slowed as more soldiers filled the courtyard. The balance of power shifted in real time. Stannis looked toward Ned. "You support my claim." Ned's eyes moved to Robb, then to Jon. "We support the truth." Cersei grabbed Joffrey's arm. "Inside, now." But it was too late. The Red Keep was no longer under Lion control. It was divided. Robb stood breathing heavily, sword still raised. Jon looked around at the broken courtyard, at the torn banners, at the fallen men. The game had ended. War had begun. Stannis stepped toward the Iron Throne inside the hall. But before he could approach it, Jon spoke. "There is something you all need to know." Silence fell again. Even Ned looked surprised. John stepped forward into the center of the hall. Robert once said he would build his legacy not through blood, but through strength. He looked at Stannis, then at Ned. The realm needs more than a rightful name. It needs unity. The room waited. John took a breath. And if this war continues, the real enemy will rise while we fight each other. Stannis narrowed his eyes. What enemy? John's voice grew serious. The North remembers more than politics. The White Walkers are coming. The hall fell into complete silence. Outside, the storm raged stronger. And now the throne was not the only thing at stake. Silence filled the throne room after Jon's words. The White Walkers are coming. At first, some men laughed nervously, others looked confused, but Ned Stark did not laugh, and neither did Stannis. Cersei, however, smirked slightly. Now the bastard speaks of children's stories to scare us. Jon didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on Stannis and the gathered lords. The Night's Watch has sent ravens. Villages beyond the wall are empty. Rangers have vanished. This is not a story. Ned stepped forward. I have seen the letters. The Watch is afraid. Stannis crossed his arms. Fear does not prove an army of the dead. Jon met his gaze firmly. Then send men north. See for yourself. The room was divided again. Some whispered that this was a trick from the Starks to weaken the South. Others looked uneasy. Robb stepped beside Jon. If we fight each other now, we weaken the realm. And if what my brother says is true, we will not survive divided. Cersei laughed coldly. Convenient. You bring northern soldiers, claim monsters are coming, and ask us to trust you. Before Robb could answer, a guard rushed into the hall, pale and shaking. My lords, there is a raven from Castle Black. The hall froze again. The message was handed to Stannis first. He broke the seal, read quickly, and his face hardened. He passed it to Ned. Ned's hands tightened slightly. It says the dead walk, Ned said quietly, and the wall has been attacked. Now even the doubters fell silent. Stannis looked at Jon differently now. Not as a boy, not as a rival. Assemble the council, Stannis ordered. Now. Hours later, the most powerful people in the capital gathered in the war chamber. The air felt heavy. Stannis stood at the head of the table. If this is true, we face a threat greater than any throne. Cersei leaned back in her chair. And who leads this great defense? You. Stannis ignored her. His eyes moved to Jon. You speak of unity. What do you suggest? Jon stepped forward slowly. Send half the southern forces north immediately. Strengthen the wall. Prepare dragon-blast weapons. And call every lord to stand together. Dragon-blast? One lord asked. It kills them, Jon replied calmly. Robb added, the north will stand, but we cannot hold alone. Stannis considered this carefully. He was not a warm man, but he was practical. If we march north, Stannis said, the throne remains vulnerable. Cersei's lips curved slightly. Exactly. Ned looked at Stannis. If the dead breach the wall, there will be no throne left to protect. The argument lasted for hours. In the end, Stannis made a bold decision. We march north, he declared. All of us. Cersei stood suddenly. You would abandon King's Landing. I would protect the realm, Stannis answered coldly. Joffrey slammed his hand on the table. I am king. Stannis turned toward him slowly. You are a boy. For the first time, the throne room truly shifted. Robert's living legacy was no longer about crowns. It was about survival. That night, Jon stood alone on the castle wall again, looking toward the dark northern horizon. Robb joined him quietly. You've changed everything. Jon shook his head. No, the dead did. Robb leaned on the stone railing. Do you think we can win? Jon thought about the wall, about the cold winds, about the stories old Nan used to tell. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know this. If we stand together, we have a chance." Below them, soldiers were already preparing. Southern knights packing supplies, northern warriors sharpening axes, Baratheon banners flying beside stark direwolves. For the first time, lions were not leading, wolves were guiding. Inside her chambers, Cersei stood alone with Jaime. "They are walking into a frozen grave," she said quietly. Jaime frowned. "And if the threat is real," Cersei's eyes darkened, "then let the North bleed first." Back in the courtyard, Stannis approached Jon privately. "You speak boldly for someone without a name," Stannis said. Jon held his gaze. "Names do not stop winter." Stannis almost smiled. Almost. "If you are wrong," Stannis said quietly, "you will answer for it." Jon nodded. "If I am wrong, there will be no one left to answer." Stannis walked away without another word. Days later, the great army began its march north. It was something the realm had never seen before. Baratheon stags, stark direwolves, even reluctant Lannister lions riding under one cause. Robert Baratheon's dream of unity had come true, but not in the way he imagined. He had wanted warriors to protect his throne. Instead, he had created leaders to protect his world. As they rode north, the air grew colder, and far beyond the wall, in the endless snow, blue eyes opened in the darkness. They had been waiting. The real war was about to begin. The wind grew sharper the farther north they marched. It cut through armor, through fur, through pride. The great army that had once argued over a throne now moved as one long line stretching across frozen roads. Stannis rode at the front, silent and unbending. Ned Stark rode beside him. Robb commanded the northern forces with growing confidence. And Jon rode between worlds, not a lord, not a king, but something else, something Robert had unknowingly shaped. When they finally reached Winterfell, the castle gates opened with relief and fear mixed together. The banners of Stark flew high, but the people's faces told the truth. Winter had truly come. Ravens from the wall waited with worse news. "The dead do not stop," a Night's Watch messenger said. "They move like a storm. Villages are gone. The Umbers have fallen back. The wall still stands, but barely." Stannis wasted no time. "We ride to Castle Black at dawn." Cersei had remained in King's Landing, claiming the capital needed protection. Few trusted her reasons, but for now she was far away. As the army pushed beyond Winterfell, snow began to fall heavily. The world turned white and silent. And then they saw it. Smoke rising in the distance near the wall. When they reached the outer villages, there were no bodies, just emptiness, no blood, no survivors. Jon dismounted slowly. He walked into one of the abandoned homes. Food still sat on the table, frozen in place. A child's wooden toy lay on the floor. "They didn't run," Robb whispered. Jon stepped back outside. Then he heard it. A sound like cracking ice, but moving. The trees beyond the village began to shake. Blue lights flickered between them. "Form ranks!" Stannis shouted immediately. Soldiers moved fast, shields locking together. Northern archers aimed into the forest. And then they appeared. The dead, pale skin, frozen eyes glowing blue, hundreds of them walking silently through the snow. Behind them, on a dark horse, sat a White Walker. Its eyes burned like cold fire. The first wave crashed against the shields like a wall of ice. Steel struck frozen flesh. Men screamed as dead hands grabbed at them. Robb fought fiercely, cutting down one White after another. But for everyone that fell, two more rose. Jon moved differently. He aimed carefully, striking joints, necks, using dragon-glass daggers he had prepared. "Use the black blades," he shouted. Archers began firing dragon blast arrows. When they struck, the dead shattered like ice. Stannis fought in the center, his sword glowing faintly with red light. a gift from Melisandre, who had joined quietly during the march. But even with preparation, the numbers were overwhelming. Then the White Walker raised its hand. More bodies began rising from the snow, even fallen soldiers. Fear spread quickly. Robb stumbled back as a dead soldier he once rode beside stood again with empty eyes. Jon saw the walker clearly now. This was the heart of it. "Cover me!" Jon shouted. Robb immediately moved to his side. "What are you doing?" "Ending it." Jon grabbed a spear tipped with dragonglass and ran forward through the chaos. Snow flew around him. The White Walker turned its glowing gaze toward him. For a second, everything felt still. Jon remembered Robert's words. Controlled fire. He didn't scream. He didn't rush blindly. He waited. The walker swung its icy blade. Jon ducked, rolled, and drove the spear upward with all his strength. The dragonglass pierced through the creature's chest. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the walker shattered into 1,000 frozen pieces. At that exact moment, half of the dead around them collapsed into lifeless bodies. The battlefield grew silent except for heavy breathing and falling snow. The army stared in shock. Robb walked to Jon slowly. "You did it." Jon shook his head. "No, we did." Stannis approached, sword lowered. For the first time there was respect in his eyes. "You were right." Jon looked around at the surviving men, north and south, standing side by side. "This is only one," Jon said quietly. "There are more." But something had changed. They had proof now, hope. As they finally reached the wall, the Night's Watch opened the gates with disbelief and gratitude. The realm had come, not divided, united. That night, inside Castle Black, the leaders gathered. Stannis spoke clearly. "The Iron Throne can wait. From this moment forward, we fight as one kingdom." Ned placed a hand on Robb's shoulder. Robert Baratheon had wanted a legacy of strength. He had gotten something greater. 2 wolves who had united a broken realm. Outside, beyond the wall, the snow continued to fall. More blue eyes opened in the darkness. The Great War was far from over. But now, humanity had leaders who did not fight for crowns. They fought for survival, and that was Robert Baratheon's true living legacy.